welcome back to the Healthtech Pigeon podcast brought to you by SomX, where we break down the health tech news every single week. I am joined today by SomX's wonderful Amy and also the brilliant Benedikt from Sanome. Welcome, both of you. How are you doing?
I'll let you go, Benedikt.
You're going to let me go? No, come on, it's always ladies first, come on.
Oh, I'm well. I'm doing well. It's been a busy week as per usual here at SomX, but lots going on, and I'm really looking forward to this chat. I've heard a lot about you, Benedikt, and I'm interested to learn more. So yeah.
Oh dear, I don't know. I hope you've only heard good things, but this is going to be awesome. I love speaking to you guys. This is cool.
Well, we are delighted to have you with us, and we've got some important news to talk about this week. So why don't we get straight into the stories? And the first one is about regulation. Now, I know what everyone's thinking. Oh, not another story on regulation. It's getting a bit
Regulation is
now.
Sexy.
There we go. How long did that take? 1 minute and 20 seconds of recording. Bam. In there with a headline. That's what we're here to talk about. The big news in town is that we want to hear about Sanome's latest regulatory certification, and it's a really big deal. You have achieved Class 2B CE marking for software as a medical device to detect hospital infections. So let's start from the top. Why don't you tell us exactly what's happened, and then I want to interrogate you about how you did it, because I think we all know that is a hell of an achievement. It is no easy feat, and there'll be a lot of probably technical specialists and founders wanting to know the tea on how you achieved it. They want your playbook, and I also want to know what it means for healthcare, because it's a big deal. So take it away. Tell us about your news.
I'm still speechless. And I don't know if that's because of the party we had internally or 18 months of just brutal, hardcore. I've never been through anything like that before. And there is a reason why large tech and so many other companies have failed at doing it, because it's so hard. Because ultimately you're putting a product on market that has the potential to kill someone if it goes wrong. And you have, as a result, got to put so many safeguards in place to show that the tool actually works. And it's not only about does it work, it's about can you hack it? What happens if you manipulate it? What happens if it goes wrong, etc., etc., etc. So the amount of evidence you have to produce to the regulators, or in this case, the notified body, is ginormous. But the flip side to that is it's actually really cool evidence, because we can now legitimately say, this is the tool and this is how it works and it's safe. You can trust us. This is our evidence. So in a very high, in a nutshell, what it actually does, or one of the big problems we have in hospitals in the UK, or take any hospital in the world actually, is that somewhere between 5 and 10% of patients that go into that hospital will go on and develop an infection. Right? The wound may become infected after surgery, or a patient picks up pneumonia, or even a catheter-associated UTI. And each one of them is obviously really shit for the patient. Right? It's really uncomfortable, can lead to death, can lead to all sorts of complications. But also from a hospital perspective, it's terrible, because the patient will stay longer in the hospital as a result. And hospitals are really dangerous places, because there's more infections you can pick up, or you can fall out of bed and fracture your hip, or your kidneys stack up, or anything like that. So infections are one of these really horrible things that we don't really talk about, yet it's the number one reason for extending hospital stays. So it's a huge drain on a healthcare system. In the UK, it's estimated to be £2.5 to £3 billion a year are lost because patients are spending more time in hospital due to those infections. So when we looked at those numbers, the first thing we said, hang on a minute, we've got access to all of the data. Can we not use this data to predict and detect these infections earlier, to give clinical teams a greater opportunity to intervene early. And infections are really easy. If I know there's an infection, the earlier I treat it with an antibiotic, for example, the better it is, the better the outcome. So giving clinical teams a greater window of opportunity to intervene earlier was kind of a key thing that we set out to do. But obviously, if we don't detect it and a patient continues to develop the infection and may become septic and then die, we could be blamed for it. So that's the evidence we ultimately need to prove. Sorry, I'm blabbing on again. I just get really excited about this topic. So
not at all.
Across me, I can keep talking about this forever and ever and ever and ever because it is such a major problem. But we've got it. We solved it. And we're now, actually, no, I can't share that yet because there's some more news and you tell me off for sharing it too early.
I will. Stop. Okay, stop talking. Stop talking. I'm going to cut you off there. Well, I think, tell us about how you did it, first of all, because as you said, it is hard. You didn't go through a traditional route. And also, this is just the beginning. The intention is, obviously, so you have your platform MEMORI. The intention is that you create this software as a medical device factory. And, again, that sounds incredibly visionary based on, the infrastructure that exists today, because every SAMD that gets created is going to need to go through regulatory approval. So why does this certification matter so much, and what does it unlock for the next piece of the puzzle?
Okay, so if we are, where to start? So what it really proves, and how do we start, is we're now at a point in healthcare where demand is rapidly outpacing the ability to provide care. I think everyone knows that problem. So what we have as a reason also then is that clinical teams are so overwhelmed with information that they don't understand their patients properly. They can't. They just physically don't have the time. So we're now only reacting to stuff that's in front of us. So the first thing we have to do is, how can we help a clinical team understand their patients better? We picked infections as the first one, but given that vision is all about supporting clinical teams to understand their patients so they can provide the right care at the right time, we needed to start getting access to real-time data. Not some historic data set somewhere to train up an AI, but real-world clinical data in real time. And that took us probably 2.5 years of working with patient representatives, working with hospital boards, working with ethics, working with confidentiality advisory groups, putting the frameworks in place to get access to that data stream. And critically also working with the electronic patient record providers, who very often, or increasingly now, sitting there as kind of the hub, or will be the hub of where that data flows in together. And we pull that off. So we now have all of that data. And effectively what we now have is the ability to build predictive models for every single clinical decision there is. And if you look at ICD-10, ICD-11 codes, there are 55,000 clinical decisions per se, as a very rough rule of thumb. Now, each one of them, in theory, can be supported by a really powerful AI that detects that event earlier, makes it more granular, makes it more predictive, more personalized, whatever that task is. So when we set off this, we now have all of this data. How do we build 55,000 SAMDs?
Sounds like more than a life's work, if you ask me.
And traditionally, and other people that have gone through this process, they will know it would typically take 3 to 5 years to go through the process and cost $5 million, $10 million, or 8 to 10 million pounds just to get through that process. That is not scalable. So we had to rethink two key things. One of them is, how can we leverage the data that we have? How can we leverage the regulatory path we have to build 55,000 SAMDs? And that's what we've now done. So we haven't built the 55,000, but we have now built a framework that has been agreed on by our notified body and is imminently going to be agreed on by the FDA. We're now deep into FDA world and FDA work. And thanks to our dear friends in the US government. It's a bit uncertain when that timeline may happen. It may be before Christmas, but most likely Q1, Q2 next year. And then we've proven that we can take good data, put an AI on top, build a model, and get that fully certified across the bench. And we are now on track to, well, we have now demonstrated 10 times faster and cheaper. We're now on track to get that to 100 times faster and cheaper, at which point it now suddenly becomes affordable for hospitals to have AI-enabled clinical decision support across their entire stack to empower their clinicians to make better decisions and earlier decisions. So that was a long waffle. I didn't really go into specifics. So feel free to cut everything out I've just said and start again if you want me to give you a very short and snappy answer.
No, not at all. I think that's interesting, but I am interested in the nitty gritty. So clearly, you are a relatively early stage startup. You have brilliant people around you, phenomenal team, but there's only so much brain power that you have between you. So how did you go about finding the right expertise and identifying what the right pathway would be to be able to do this quicker and cheaper? How did you do that?
Yeah, so we've been extremely, extremely cash constrained. So we've done all of this for a fraction of the price of what other people had to do. So we had to rethink the entire game. And this is a huge shout out to the whole team at Sanome, but also people that we've pulled in for help. Arnold Porter being Hardy and Health, so Hugh Harvey and Mike Pagozzi and that team. Also the team at Scarlet who are also building a new platform of paradigm shift of doing it. And we've learned a huge amount of stuff together of how can you use the existing regulatory frameworks to take a totally new approach to certifying this. And in a very, very high, on a very high level, one of the key challenges you have is the need for running expensive, time-consuming prospective studies to generate clinical evidence. Now that is, I would always call, an old way of doing it, and kind of makes sense because I want to have it in clinical practice in a safe way to show that it works. It comes out of the pharmaceutical world, right, where I'm giving healthy patients a drug, see what happens, then give it to sick patients, see what happens, blah, blah, blah. But if we're taking that to AI, it's not really a sensible approach anymore, because we know that if I build an AI for one setting and then put it into a real world setting, it doesn't translate particularly well. So yes, I might have the certification, but oh shit, it actually doesn't translate well into clinical practice.
That's a really interesting parallel to animal testing and the transition then into human testing, because we know that actually so many therapeutics that show promise in animals, actually that promise doesn't translate in a real world, real human being. So that's super interesting.
And we have that in AI AMD as well, right? So you've got a historic data set, someone's built up a model and says, hey, I can predict this event, or I can detect cancer with this accuracy, like 99.9% accuracy. And it's like, isn't that amazing? You put it into clinical practice and it's like, it doesn't work. And everyone goes like, oh shit. Boom. But I've now sunk millions and millions and millions of pounds of investment into that company to get it to clinic, and then it doesn't perform. So how can you rethink it? And one of the things we've been working very closely with our notified bodies on is, can we create a safe way of bringing something to market really, really, really quickly? And this is where the real world, real-time data comes in quite nicely. So we build a model on retrospective data. We then immediately put that model into clinical practice in silent mode, or sleep mode, some people call it. So we're then calibrating on what happened without actually influencing clinical decision-making. And then the secret comes in the post-market surveillance, post-market clinical follow-up study, so PMS, PMCF, where because we have that real-time data, you can immediately see how's that model performing. And if it's not performing as intended, you just put it for market straight away. So this whole framework we have built up with our partner hospitals is effectively we build retrospective first, then we put it into silent mode. Then we get regulatory approval on that, on the condition that it then runs in this post-market surveillance study for a period of time to show that it works in real life and safe. So that's step. So it gets us something into clinic really, really quickly. We proof of principle it that it actually works before we expand it everywhere, and then it's safe. And regulators love that because it de-risks stuff and it gets innovation to market a lot faster, but it puts it into controlled and safe way without putting patients at harm. And that was a huge, huge breakthrough for us to get that through. We're not the first, but we are one of the first to have that come through. And that approach is just mind-boggling. It's amazing because we can now get 55,000 innovations to market really, really quickly.
Yeah, what I find interesting about that as well is that we often talk about regulation holding things back, but actually this is innovation in regulation in practice. And that's, I think, encouraging.
I think it's more than just innovation in regulation. I think that's a really, really important thing to call out because there are players like Scarlett that are now trying to innovate stuff by making stuff more efficient through the assessment. There are players like the MHRA and even the EU MDR that are trying to find novel ways of getting stuff to market faster. But from our perspective here, where have the biggest innovations come from? The real-time data access, the multimodal AI approach we're using, and then loads of small innovations in the way we have set up our toolset. And now we're talking about something which most people don't really talk about, which is your QMS. If you ask Hugh Harvey, that's probably what Harvey would say is, get your QMS right, your ISO 13485 right. That's where most of the bulk of the work comes from. And what that is in a nutshell, and stop me if I'm telling you something that you already know, it's effectively how do you as a company build something? And very much that comes down to your culture. So it's your engineering culture, your risk culture, your documentation culture, your tooling, how you use it. So that's one of the reasons why so many companies that have started of being a, large tech giant or I've done something non-regulated and now I want to go into the regulated space, they typically break down because they can't get the culture set up to build something in a QMS conform way. And this is probably the wrong forum, but there are hundreds of examples of where that's happened. Millions, if not billions of pounds or dollars have been wasted. And it comes back to your QMS. And there is so much thinking we had to do. And when we went back to the drawing board 2.5 years ago, just Eddie and Nita on our team, the way they thought about it, we have to get that right. And we have to hire for that. And now it's so embedded in our culture that it's second nature to us. And we always get surprised when you speak to another company and they don't have it. You go like, well, that's the right thing to do. But that's why we can now scale. So a huge innovation actually come from that.
You mentioned the process was of getting the certification was incredibly hard. Do you think that actually that regulatory approval is stopping some good innovations from actually getting to market? Or do you think that it's an adequate step required for companies?
I think it's an adequate step because the amount of shit that is being developed and being deployed, right, and being peddled. There are like some really big things that really scare me. So in-house developed tests, hey, it's a great way if you're a healthcare provider, you can develop a test in-house and you can test it on your patients with very, very limited regulatory oversight. That is scary, right? But it's a good thing to get innovation out, but that is really scary. Similarly, and this is probably where I would love governments to fund regulators better. The amount of shit that's being sold on the market and promised. And there's no wonder people get fed up with AI and getting scared of AI because they get peddled all of this crap. There's no regulatory oversight. And the amount of companies that now claim to be class 1 compliant, which basically means they're conform with the MDR, the medical device regulation, or MDD in the UK still. They're not. Absolutely no way there's not, but there's no oversight, right? Because in order to have that in place, you must have a whole risk quality assurance function. So it's like, guys, stop pissing around. Get the regulation right. Work with it properly. There is a bottleneck, and that's your notified bodies. There's not enough notified bodies to take you through. So there is a risk of, well, at the moment, you can wait 1 to 2 years just to even start working with your notified body. And that's where the bottleneck is. But that's not a regulator's fault. That's a notified, well, I guess it is. But fund the regulators properly. And do the right thing. Just get it done, because we cannot afford another Theranos. We can't. And we're literally waiting. We've now seen, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago, the first patient that died because of an AI scribe, or not an AI scribe, an AI tool doing the wrong thing. It cannot. Like, it will go through the press. And we'll then have the next thing, and everyone doesn't want to have any adoption at all. We just want to go back to pen and paper, which also kills business.
Has to be done properly, doesn't it? I mean, there's been a lot of spotlight on that recently, and something that we talk about quite a lot in Pigeon is that balance of regulations, but also accuracy and safety at the end of the day. There's a lot of fast-moving tech, and we need to make sure it's safe. There's a big spotlight on those rapid off-the-shelf tests that came out on the BMJ a couple of weeks ago, and that shed light on a lot of inaccurate claims that people were making from accuracy of those tests, and it actually ended up with more people visiting the hospitals and GPs trying to get more information. So I think it ties in with this as well. It's like we need to give people the right information, and but more importantly, make sure that things are not going to be giving them false results that's actually really harmful. So
then that creates that worsens the problem that it's claiming to solve, doesn't it? Whether or not it's outside of a hospital driving people into a hospital, or in fact, supporting clinicians to make the wrong decisions, pointing them in the wrong directions. It's it has to be fixed. It has to be fixed, and I think that it's great that we have examples like MEMORI and Sanome that it is of what is possible. My ears pricked up when you said that you've done it cheaper, and to play devil's advocate, does cheaper mean that you've had to compromise on anything? And why has it been cheaper? Because people are going to think, brilliant, if I can save a bit of money, tell me how. Let's do this. What's your cheat sheet? And have you had to compromise on anything?
Very, very, very good question. So the bit where we have compromised to a degree, but with our eyes wide open and in very open dialogue with the notified body and stuff, is that the thing I was talking about right at the beginning is we haven't done a full-blown randomized control study as part of our submission, right? Because that would take a lot. So there is limitations, right? We know that with AI CDS or AI clinical decision support tools, that even if we'd had that, we would still have to, for every single deployment, validate that it actually works. So we've cut out that bit of the cost, but we now need to do it, but we can do it whilst we're on market. So we believe we do it in a much, much better way. So you've shifted some of that cost out of the way. The other thing where a lot of the cost saving comes from is very simple economies of scale. So because we are now repeating the same toolbox, the same pipelines, the same documentation over and over again, we're very much on a trajectory to do this 100 times cheaper and faster. And another big one, and this is what's now very much on the roadmap, is there is a way to certify the entire platform rather than the individual algorithm.
Okay.
Huma have done that on their remote patient monitoring platform. Yep. And the brains behind that were 3 people that we're working with very closely. Nita, who's now our head of regs, and Arash, who's one of our advisors, and someone else who shall remain unnamed. They get the entire Huma platform certified, meaning that every individual device that gets built within the platform is automatically certified. Now, Hugh, I can already hear Hugh in the background saying that's not quite true, and he is right, quite true. But there is a way to do it, and Nita knows exactly how to do it, and we're on track to do that. But once you do that, means, and this is a total breakthrough, is at the moment, if you have to build an individual algorithm, you have to build your technical file and your clinical evidence, and that still takes 3 to 6 months. And that's where a lot of the cost sits in. Now, if the toolbox is fully certified, means I can now suddenly build something within a matter of days, weeks, and have it fully certified as a Class 2B software as a medical device. As long as it uses that same process, retrospective, silent mode, live deployment into a controlled environment. And then, holy shit, then 55,000 clinical decisions doesn't seem that unreasonable anymore as a way to build that. That means you can get to a clinical assistant or clinical intelligence platform that supports every single clinical decision, that understands you, Jessica, that understands you, Amy, down to the granular detail and knows your unique biology, your unique health, and can support a doctor or a nurse or any healthcare professional providing the right care for you at the right time, the right dosage, in the right environment, so you have the best possible outcome. And that is what we have put in place. And I mean, it's amazing. Sorry, I'm swearing.
Sorry, we'll put an explicit warning on this. You're fine. What I'm hearing is protect Nita at all costs.
I would say it's more than Nita. I think it's because it's the culture of the team that we have built here, and trenches we went through, and we've made a difficult decision, but the right decision, that everyone, the entire company, needs to be involved. It's not an external body. It's not everyone has to participate, no matter who you are. And that means everyone lives and breathes quality assurance. Everyone lives and breathes regs. Everyone understands how regs works, understands documentation, and it's inbuilt into all of our product functions. Every bit use a conversation we have, every bit of functionality we have, head straight back into that pipeline. So it's the entire team I need to protect.
Well, yes, there we go. Get some good insurance, I reckon.
Yes. Don't give me the money for that.
I can't, but I know some people who might be able to. Awesome. Well, look, congratulations. I think it's super impressive. I think it makes a big statement as to what's possible. It sets a standard for, that all innovators should be not just aspiring to, but it kind of seems like it's a minimum standard actually at this point. And so, it's great that we're able to celebrate it, but it's almost like, well, of course, this is what we should have been doing all along anyway. So it's awesome that we have this as an example for people to look to. And I'm sure there'll be lots of people who have questions and want to know, as I said, the detail of your blueprint and your playbook so that they can do something similar. So yeah, congratulations. Let's move on to our next story.
Finally finished building it.
Lovely.
Is that the actual certificate in a frame?
Yeah, it's one of three.
For our people listening out there, they won't be able to see it. Yeah, there's a nice certificate in a frame that we can see. Benedikt holding it extremely proudly.
Well, so I put a huge amount of my own money into this, so it's going to vindicate.
All right, so our second story comes to us today from The Independent, and I think probably regulation is another big topic here because it's talking about why ChatGPT is adding some mental health guardrails after a huge number of reports of the platform feeding people's mental health delusions. I've read a couple of stories recently that are absolutely frightening about this, and how not just ChatGPT but other large language models that people are engaging with for maybe mental health reasons or loneliness reasons, or just because they found a new AI friend, and how it's feeding a fake reality. And clearly, ChatGPT is not designated as a medical device, doesn't have the regulation that Sanome and MEMORI has, or any at all, to be quite frank, in the healthcare domain, which is a big conversation in and of itself that I know is swirling around the industry. But increasingly, as we've already talked about, the health system is under pressure, it's overwhelmed, and just not able to meet the capacity that to treat people as they need to be. So we're seeing long waiting lists for things like mental health, and people are looking for solutions themselves. But the bottom line is that these types of solutions don't have any regulation to protect people. So, Amy, what do you make of this story?
I mean, there's quite a few aspects to dig into. One is how exactly they are going to regulate this. So in the story itself, they mention that the guardrails they've put in place to me seem relatively weak. right now, but maybe that's all they can do right now. And I suppose it's that iteration process of how do we go about it. What they're saying right now is that they are going to give people gentle reminders, encouraging them to take a break if people have been spending too long on ChatGPT, which seems like a somewhat sensible option. But is that really going to address the multitude of problems that are coming out of this kind of story? I'm skeptical, and great that they're addressing it, but way more needs to be done than that. And then there's the flip side of it is also generally AI tools and mental health and how we use them. Like, there are other companies that have developed specific tools for this. So, how does that work? How are these two things going to work together? Is it that ChatGPT doesn't actually take on like that work at all, and then it could signpost people to the right tools, if that's even possible? But yeah, my high level thoughts, still very concerned of how exactly this is going to be regulated, given the access of ChatGPT to everybody, and then also how we involve other tools that are specifically designed for this. So yeah, I'm skeptical and worried and interested to see what more can be done. I don't know the answers myself, and I would be interested to see what they are.
Yeah, well, me too. Benedikt, have you got any answers?
I'm going to say it. Regulation is sexy. Go and get a medical device. Right? Let's make sure. Let's work together. Let's bring that innovation safely to market to help patients. I mean, what's unbelievable is to see how many patients want, or people, not even patients, people want to use these tools because they're worried about their health, they're worried about their mental health, they're looking for support, they're desperate for help, and they're not getting it in their healthcare systems, particularly mental health. And now we have a tool here that is giving people comfort, potentially giving them support that they need. So that's a wonderful thing. But I think, as you said, Amy, putting a simple disclaimer on saying hands up, well, stop using me is not a safeguard. We saw the same thing when that happened with Facebook 10, 15 years ago when we started talking about the whole social media hype, right? It is embrace the regulations and use that as a defensive mode. Why not? Like, the beauty of it is once you're a medical device, you can start working with payers or insurance companies to say, okay, I have taken this cost out of the system. I want to be paid for that. Right? Proper value-based care models. But that means getting real about the regulation. Now, will a tech giant disclose, and challenge everyone on here, the algorithms? Or do you want to be a software of unknown provenance, which is the regulatory term? And again, Hugh Harvey will like that. I know that. I've done my homework.
It's that culture you've been talking about. Living and breathing it.
Yeah, gosh, no, it's probably embarrassing, but I'm not as much of an EU MDR connoisseur as some other people in the office, but boy, that is dry reading. But let's work together and let's get that through the regs. I'm here. So OpenAI, or come and approach me. I'll do it with you.
The other aspect of this as well, I mean, mental health, as we know, is a very complex area, which make regulations especially difficult because of the nuances. At the end of this piece in The Independent, they mentioned that OpenAI had said new behavior for high stakes personal decisions is rolling out soon. Again, it raises lots of questions about how do we define that? At what point do we define a personal high stakes decision and a mental health crisis? How do we differentiate that? And are the regulations even built to support that kind of decision making? And do we need, as you were saying, Benedikt, like the skills and expertise? We need more skills and expertise to kind of unpick this and fund the regulations better, because I'm not sure that we're equipped to make these kind of decisions, especially not very quickly, and we do need to make them very quickly. So that's another concern, is just the complexity that's involved in this kind of decision for mental health.
I don't know if there's still time, but very happy to share a story. If not,
yeah, no, go for it. We're all about stories.
Yeah, my father suffered from bipolar disorder, right? As many people do in the UK and globally, right? And it's very, very hard for an outside person to understand what state is that person in at any one point in time. Do they have a good day? Do they have a bad day? Are they hiding it? Right? But as someone who knew him very well, I could generally tell what state he was because I understood him. Right? The way he ate, the way he slept, the way he talked, the way he moved, all of those things. And fundamentally, what it comes down to, so even as a tool like ChatGPT or any tool, is do they really understand who the patient's in front of them? Well, they only got one viewpoint, which is the interaction I'm having with that tool. So that multimodality is not there. So it cannot really understand it. It cannot provide that support tailored properly. That's where human therapists or psychotherapists in this case, mental health nurses come in, because they see and understand the patient in front of them and then provide that tailored support. And that's very often the difference between a tool that supports and a human. So what it comes down to, and this is what we're doing at Sanome, is we help clinical people understand who the patient is so they can provide the right care at that point in time. So you can't just hide behind, oh, I'm actually just going to put a brave smile on and everything's fine. And everyone says, well, fine, you don't need medication. You don't need that support today. Now, actually, you go, done. And that's a subtle difference, but important difference here.
Though it's in those real life stories where it's very confronting that, you know, the genuine impact for good and for bad some of this stuff has. And the big question that I wrestle with here is, what is the incentive for OpenAI to submit to the regulatory process that you have? What's the incentive? Because it's been talked about a lot and for a long time. And what I'm hearing so far is, well, we're not a medical device. That's not why we exist. That's never been our intention. If people use it for that, that's their responsibility, whether it's a clinician who is putting in some symptoms or asking for help summarizing their notes, or whether it is someone who is feeling really lonely and wants someone to talk to, or trying to unpick a problem and order their thoughts. And so what I'm hearing so far is that it puts the onus back onto the users and doesn't take responsibility as a tech provider and a tech developer. And I don't know what the incentive is, and I don't know where that accountability comes, because who's going to hold them accountable at the end of the day? Because technically, they're not doing anything wrong. You know, so it's really tough to know what is the force that's going to push this in the direction it needs to go. I don't have answers.
Hey, you want to take that one? I'm happy to share some thoughts on this.
Well, I think, I mean, incentive is one thing, but there's responsibility morally, and if people are being harmed, but I don't know if moral responsibility always translates into action. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that it does, but it doesn't, as we know.
Probably only at the point where it affects reputation and that affects share price, and then probably morals and ethics becomes incredibly important.
There we go. So
I'll share a story again from a previous company of mine, Speechmatics, where we built speech recognition engines. And one of the things we could do, and this was 2015, 2016, is transcribe multilingual audio really, really well. Now, you may remember back then there were a number of social media companies that had a huge trust problem in that they had hate speech on their platform. And those social media companies shall remain unnamed. I'm pretty sure you know who they are. And they were desperately trying to find solutions that could transcribe the audio, that they could then remove any damaging content from their platform, because it was directly impacting public reputation, share price, obviously. But more importantly, where did their revenues come from? And there was advertisers. And advertisers were actively starting to pull their services from their platform. And we'll see where the business model goes with ChatGPT, but ultimately, in the simplest way, that's where it comes from. The second one, where is the incentive, is what happens if someone does die, and we can directly build a link to, it was as a result of that thing. So we're going to have a court case where they get sued and then they'll be gross negligent. And we see that in the healthcare space all the time. Effectively, healthcare is all about liability. Whose fault was it really that something happened to this patient? That's why we document. That's why we have reviews, etc., etc. A huge cost in the healthcare system is actually payouts due to medical errors. Now, we will see, and we are seeing the same thing, if a tool is considered to drive or influence clinical decision-making and or patient risk or patient harm, we have to certify it. And because otherwise the manufacturer can be held liable and has been held liable before. Come back to the point, we need more money in the regulators to hold manufacturers to account that they're not creating harm. Because the excuse, and I don't buy that excuse, well, it's just the patient, let them do what they want to do. If I give them a knife and they decide to stab themselves, that is their fault. Fine, but that's why we try and limit the way that knives get sold because of that risk. We've done the same thing with cigarettes. We've done the same with harmful foods. We've done it with lots of toys. We've done it with asbestos. So there's so much precedent that there's tools that have been sold that caused patient harm because people are stupid. People would always do stupid things. I love kite surfing. Now, there is a risk of death and injury. Well, I'm injured. I've got a ruptured Achilles, but I still do it. But there are massive disclaimers on the toolbox to say this is an extreme sport that could lead to injury. Boom. When you cannot, as a manufacturer, you cannot wipe your hands clean. That world is done. Doesn't exist. So someone is going to sue ChatGPT once people have died because of it. And yeah, so long answer.
But it's incredibly pertinent because that's a real human cost, isn't it? You know, and we talk about those real human stories, and at the end of the day, it's not until people lose their lives and then we start to lose our humanity that people start to sit up and take notice. And that's deeply painful, I think, for many of us in this space who know and understand that's not the right approach. And I think, by and large, I think as we exist in healthcare, I think that's pretty well understood. I think when we look more broadly, it's much easier for corporations to turn a blind eye until they really are forced to sit up and take notice. And I think in those circumstances, it's unfortunately not seen as those human lives. It's seen as numbers, and it's the numbers that then do the talking. And that's frightening. That's not a world that we want to exist in. And that's why we have people like you doing the right thing with the regulation, and others who do the right thing with the regulation to make sure that people are protected. It's big feelings.
It is, but this is what makes us human, right? And this is what makes us get out of bed, and this is what makes us function on 2 hours of sleep. And because ultimately, if you can take what you've done and directly correlate it, money is nice, but actually, does it make you happier? I mean, I love spending money, of course. I love good food. I love kite surfing. I love all that stuff. But ultimately, where do I get a lot of pride and satisfaction from is that very deeply human thing. And seeing the team come together and pull through the trenches and filling your 10,000th conformer on the Scarlet platform. I mean, my God, that was dull as... But we pulled through, and that's the story that we now love and breathe and talk about. And we know that there's 50,000 people in the UK that die every year because their infections are detected too late. Right? It's a ginormous number, ginormous. Right? Oh, here's a fun question. What's the number one killer?
In hospitals?
Yeah. Or generally, what's the number one killer?
I feel like I should probably know this from reading your press release, but I'm going to refrain from answering.
I'll send you the stats. Everyone talks about cancer, and we talk about stroke, and we talk about these really big emotional things. But it's the little infections. Because we all have infections regularly. We're not that scared of them, but it's infections as a whole that kill more people than anything else.
And to be honest,
number one or number two, I can send you the exact stats. But
that makes sense, because I think we often talk about like elderly relatives and that it's a really awful thing to say, but often going into hospital could be a death sentence for them. So if they break their hip, they can catch pneumonia or sepsis or something in hospital, and it's not the hip that has caused their deterioration, it's the infection that they've caught. And so, and I think from my own personal experience, every time my nan goes into hospital, part of me thinks, is she going to come out? And she's caught so many infections from being in hospital, so many. And yeah, I guess that when you put it like that, it makes sense. It makes sense.
Not even to mention that this is the more geeky one, but the antimicrobial resistance. That is the next ticking time bomb. The next COVID we're sitting on is a multi-drug resistant organism that we cannot treat. And we're going to be back in the dark ages where infant mortality is going to go through the roof again because of a little bug. Evolutionary, that's happened time and time and time again. It's scary. And every single time we give someone an antibiotic, increase that risk. Anyway, let's put it to more positive stuff. I think it's gone really dark and gloomy.
It's gone really dark and gloomy. So has the sky. We're hoping for some better weather for the rest of the summer. Come on, August, we know you can do it. All right. Well, do you know what? Well, how can we wrap this up in a positive? Ultimately, OpenAI are not regulating ChatGPT just yet, but Benedikt has made them an offer that you'd think that they wouldn't be able to refuse. So that's definitely a positive. And
any tech giant, Google, Microsoft, any of you guys that are listening to this, come to me. We can do this together. We can save lives. We can turn you into the most successful brand in the world. Well, you already are. But we can get it regulated. And we can make a shit ton of money, and let's have some fun.
There we go. That's a good positive. And we have a lot to celebrate. It sounds like you've been celebrating hard. So, I think carry that on for a little bit longer. And then it sounds like there's some other stuff in the pipeline that we're going to be celebrating pretty soon as well. So,
what's happening? Jessica, you know me. What's happening?
The thing is, you're about 2 months ahead of everybody else. Everyone's trying to catch up with you. You're a whirlwind, but it's phenomenal, and it's really exciting to hear. So, yeah, good job, Sanome team, and for everybody else, regulation is sexy. It's possible. It's hard, but it's worth it. And there is a better, not necessarily easier, but there is a better way. And if you need the details, you know where to find Benedikt. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Benedikt, so much for joining me this week. Who knew that we could get so passionate and in our feelings about regulation? I'm sure it's a theme that will continue. And
regulation is sexy. I'll say it again.
And on that note, see you all next week.
Bye.